Hey, we're back with another conversation. I'm here this week with Craig, and it's good to have Craig back. We're in a series right now called Rhythms, and we're talking about rhythms of our church and rhythms of life. And today, we're going to talk about a rhythm that your message is on this weekend that's maybe not as easy as others, and that really is this idea of transitions. I'm here, I'm not here, I used to be here, and I'm going there. And maybe I don't even know what there is. And how do I make those transitions?
Yeah, I was thinking about our series titled Rhythms, and the one constant that I find in my life is change. And I know it almost feels like those two really don't go together, and yet I'm in a constant rhythm of going from here to there.
Yeah.
It seems like just when I feel like I've got a grip on life, I realize here's a new change, and I'm getting ready to go through another transition.
So you kind of use the example of Joshua in your message. And so if you want to watch the full message, you should do that. You can go to our website and watch it. It's a great message. But we're really talk about Joshua and his transition into leadership. But as we were talking a few minutes ago, Joshua's been around for a long time in the story, in the background.
He really has. And one of the first things I wanted to kind of introduce in the message is this concept of, I think when we're faced with change, a lot of times we're so focused on where we're getting ready to go. Mm-hmm. And that can loom large in our minds. It creates a lot of fear and anxiety for folks, while some get jacked up on excitement. The reality is, for a lot of us, I think transitions can be quite challenging. Sure. And one of the things I feel like God's helped me with, and I really saw it in this story with Joshua, is remembering Joshua didn't just show up as the next leader. God had raised him up. And it was good for me to remember Joshua had been part of the crew of Israelites that had moved up out of Egypt. So he saw the 10 plagues, the deliverance there, the Passover. Yeah. Joshua was in that crowd that crossed over the Red Sea on dry land.
Wow.
He wandered through the wilderness for 40 years as Joshua's assistant. And, it was good for me to remember this guy had been prepped all along the way.
Right.
But I think the other key is he saw God's faithfulness all along the way, and all the provisions through the wilderness. And so I think that's a real key piece to making it through transition sometimes, is reflecting on how you got here before you even think about going there.
When you think about stepping out and doing a new thing, whether that's moving, maybe you're moving somewhere, you're going to college, you're getting married, you're whatever, recently one of my children went to kindergarten, and that's a huge transition, right? They were at home, now they're at school every day, like they're on the bus, it's kind of emotional, and it's this big change, right? And
it's so funny. People think it's traumatic for the child, but it's really, it's really for the parent.
She's fine. I cried more than she, so, but it's important in those times to have something to stand on and to look to when you step into something new, because it is difficult, right? So many times I think we in this modern world like to make things as easy as possible, remove as much friction, down to just instant delivery, and whatever we want, it's just going to come to us, right? Don't have to think about it.
Right.
And sometimes God's going to call us to take some steps that are difficult. And Joshua has seen that. So he knows how he got here only by God and his faithfulness. And so now God's calling him to go there, to take a greater step. And so one thing that you mentioned in your message, which I think is so good, is just to clarify where there is. Where is the there?
It almost sounds crazy that you would want to take a little bit of time to clarify there. Yet I have found in my own life and the lives of countless others, sometimes we want out of here so bad that we will take a journey of trying to go there. We don't know where there is because we just want it out of here.
Right.
And the first moment we saw an opening, then we began to chase after it.
I'll take it.
Or I do think some of the examples that you talk about are very relevant. I think sometimes I hear singles with the excitement of, hey, I would like to get there to married. But what does there really look like in your life? And I guess I would begin to ask the question a little bit deeper. So why do you want to be married? And what kind of husband, what kind of wife do you anticipate being?
Yeah.
What are you looking for in a future spouse? Without kind of examining, I think, some of those key questions, there is so ambiguous
Sure.
that
Yeah.
honestly, there becomes nowhere.
Right. And
Because
that's where you end up.
And that's where you end up, just because we never really clarify where there is. And we don't know what the win is. I mean, how do you celebrate a win?
Yeah.
I just think about, how do you play football if there's no goal line?
Yeah.
There's
You're
got to
just
be a
gonna
goal
keep
line.
going. Yeah, you're going to get tired and you're going to be like, I don't want to go anymore. Right.
Right.
And so, so you want to know where there is. Not to say that you can pinpoint exactly where it is, but where you're aiming, you're going to go, right? Where you put your trajectory.
Absolutely. And I thought it was interesting in the passage that we look at in Joshua chapter 1. God was really specific. He gives north, south, east, west dimensions on this land.
Yeah.
And I thought, why is he that specific? Hey, I think we have to really examine there.
Yeah, that's good. So so the question really becomes, okay, God's been faithful. I get that. He's called me to this thing. I feel that. I feel that urge to go, right? And the Bible's full of God calling men and women to step out, right? Think about a lot of stories in Genesis of God calling people like Abraham to step out and go.
Right.
And God tells him, I'm gonna make you a new name and a new people. And he's like, where am I going? He's like, I'll tell you. Sometimes they go to in the land of nowhere, they find themselves there. They keep moving. In this story, God gives Joshua this kind of decree to go. But then the question I think naturally comes is, how are we going to get there? What are we going to do? Because it sounds good, right? You can cast this vision, but when it comes down to the daily sort of grind of that, how do we do that? And I thought the way that you kind of explained this is really well, and you said that it really is a dance.
It is, and I
enter
think I felt like it was a dance. There is a specific verse there that begins to transition. At the beginning of the passage, you kind of hear God telling Joshua, you're going to move into a land that I'm giving. And then you read on in, and he says, I have given it. And every place that the sole of your foot steps, you will realize that I have already given it to you.
Yeah.
And so what I see is a person leading and a person following. And then I thought, man, that's really a dance, isn't it? I mean, in a dance, now I can't dance, James. I have to admit, I'm like Hitch. I stay in my safety zone.
That's right.
So, but I do think that in every great dance, there is one who is leading and there is one who is following that lead.
Yeah.
In that passage, James, I was fascinated that God's saying, I've already gone before you. I've already given you these things. And yet you are so true. It's not been seen yet by Joshua nor any of the Israelites. So it's like this time of, well, how am I going to realize it's already been given? And man, it calls for this thing called faith.
Yeah.
And we come over to some of Paul's writings, and you come to the realization that we walk by faith today, meaning I can't see it yet, and yet I know that God has called me with great clarity to there. And so I begin to walk into it by faith. And man, is that scary at times? Here's my makeup. And I think some are like me and others are a little different. But like when I take off on something like that, I want to be able to see, James.
Yeah. You want the map overview?
I want I want the whole GPS. I do want the overview, and I want every town I'm going through. I want every stop, every turn. I want all of that.
Yeah.
And God doesn't really give that to Joshua, nor have I found on very, very rare occasions has he ever given that to me. But what I do think that he does is he will show me the next step.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not until I take that in faith that the following one even appears to me. It's really cool, though. I started thinking about beyond this text.
Right.
The rest of this story, these guys have to begin that journey. The very first thing that God tells Joshua is, you're going to cross over Jordan. And I think, what? How? Mm-hmm. And it really mimics the whole Red Sea experience.
Right.
which is probably significant for Joshua. Moses did this. Can Joshua do this?
Sure.
So sure enough, they cross over on dry land, but I'm thinking those were steps. And it drew me back to this specific verse in chapter 1 where he says, every place that your foot steps, you'll come to that realization. So they step across Jordan. And then I thought a little bit later, they actually are told by God when they encounter this first resistance is going to be Jericho.
Yeah.
So how are we going to overtake Jericho?
We're going to walk.
And he says, walk.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what is it? That's step by step.
Yeah.
What are we supposed to do? On the seventh day, you're going to take 7 laps, and I'm thinking,
it's like,
do
why?
what?
Yeah.
But
this is not a good battle plan.
All of those were steps, and every step by faith revealed God really had given them that land.
Man, that's good. I love that thought too of there's like this consistency. I remember hearing someone at a cattle's conference talk about the people that first raced to like the southernmost pole of the the world, and one of them did this thing they called the 20-mile march. Where each day they did 20 miles.
20.
If it was good, they did 20, and if it was bad, they did 20. And the other team, they went as fast as they could. Because they were like, if it's good, we're going 40. And if it's bad, we're going 10. We're just going to take advantage of the weather. They all died. They didn't make it, right? The guy that did the 20-mile march, that team actually made it on their quest to this place because there was this consistency. And when you talked about this dance, about following in those steps, it made me think of that story because it's like that. And the guys talk at the conference. It was Jim Collins who wrote Good to Great and several other books, and he's all about building these healthy teams. And that was his idea, was that you take steps together consistently. So
Absolutely.
You see where you're going. You cast it. Hey, we are going to this place, the southernmost tip of the world. Like nobody's been here, but at the same time, we're going together, and we're going to go at a pace that is going to push us, but it's not going to kill us,
Right.
And we're not going to get stuck and run out of food either. And so, you think about Joshua and all these people in this walk that they're doing. It's like seems crazy, but God's like, just keep doing it, just keep walking, keep trusting, and lo and behold. They take the city.
Yeah, here becomes there.
Yeah. And now you're at the new here, and now you got to go to a new there.
Yes.
And I think that's a difficult part too in life, is that you never arrive at the there ultimately until the end of your life. Really, it really is a continuing of that dance. Hopefully the things that God has shown you in your past are going to help you. I think about that verse in Romans about how he works all things together for the good of those who love him, and are called according to his purpose. It doesn't have to just be good to learn from it. Right? Joshua didn't just encounter good things. He encountered a lot of difficulty and struggle.
Yeah.
But
it's right after the Jericho experience, you run into the story of Achan.
Yeah.
And I think, the journey's not without peril.
Right.
And it's not without heartache and struggles. And yet I think the intimacy that you described just in, hey, God, we're taking this journey together.
Yeah.
There is a promise on multiple occasions just in those few sets of verses that we look at from chapter 1 where God says, I want to promise you, I'm with you. I've always been with you. I'm with you now. And you're going to find that wherever you go, as you proceed in the instruction that I've given to you, I will always be with you.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
What a neat dance to be able to share with the Lord.
I think about kind of the ending of this message. You said something that really ties all this together, which is who you become is far more important than where you arrive.
Yeah, it's interesting. So actually, you just mentioned that Romans 8:28 scripture, and if memory serves me correct, the very next verse just talks about one of the things that God is doing in us is conforming us into the image of his Son.
Right.
And so sometimes I forget about that in my daily walk.
Sure.
And I'm so adamant that I'm going to get from here to there that I make the destination really the goal.
Yeah.
And I forget sometimes that God's really set the transformation as his goal.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
I think along the way, I go back to this story, it's important for me to remember God was giving them a land. He had promised to all their forefathers, but they were to be identified as his people in that land.
Yeah.
And if they failed to be identified as his people, but they occupied the land, I think it's a fail.
Yeah. What difference does it make?
Right?
Right.
And so I'm thinking wherever it is, and I think that's the way that God says it, wherever it is that you go, let these practices be known in your life along the journey. Take some time to renew your mind in my word daily. And I think doing that begins to change the words that I speak, the things that I do, and ultimately the person that I am.
Yeah, that's good. To kind of pull all this together, there are people who are watching this. All of us go through transitions, but I would imagine there are some people watching this right now that are right in the beginnings of some kind of transition. It's fall, whether it's school, it's college, it's a job, it's new relationships, it's a struggle. What would you say to somebody who's in that spot that they're getting ready to kind of embark on a transition?
Well, I think a lot of what we talked about earlier today, but I think the biggest thing for me is to remember you're not by yourself. And I think that's the one thing that I heard from God trying to tell Joshua on a repeated basis.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I have been with you. I hope you can see that. I hope that you know that. You look back in the past, you're confirmed in my presence in your life. And I think for those who are going through a major transition in life, there's something about God's presence that really radically changes the way I proceed. And the thing that I'm encouraged by is that God really does want us to draw near to Him in those moments of transition. That it's not hey, when you get there, I'll meet with you. And I think sometimes we feel that way, but that's not at all the way that God designed the journey for us.
Yeah.
There's this song by Need to Breathe, I think, and I think the title is Stones Under Rushing Water. Mm-hmm. I love the lyrics simply because it just says, I'm not okay that we don't dance anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not okay that we don't talk anymore. Mm-hmm. And while it's a love story playing out, I also hear those words from the Lord. Like I'm thinking, He's saying, hey, in this dance that we enjoy, let's make sure that the intimacy between us remains strong.
That's good.
So it would be my greatest encouragement is just to remember who you're traveling with.
That's good. That's good. Well, I hope that this conversation has been an encouragement to you. We all find ourselves in places of transition frequently, maybe more frequently than you like. I like what you said at the beginning, that it's kind of the only thing that is continuing to be true is that things change. And so I hope that this was an encouragement to you. You can find all of our content on our website, on our YouTube channel. And if you want to watch this whole message, you can go to our website, hf.church, and check that out. Or you can always subscribe to our podcast. Again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.